Did anybody catch the number of that bus that just ran over the Syracuse football team? Welcome aboard, friends. It is Syracuse football postgame presented by Krause Health, the exclusive healthcare partner for Syracuse Athletics. I am Brent Axe. You are you, and we're here after a 37-31 loss by Syracuse football to Boston College in Chestnut Hill, Massachusetts. It was a lovely sunny day, little breeze out there in Massachusetts today, but no matter what we say, and we've got a few things to cover here, and we're going to hear from our Syracuse Sports Insiders coming up, and no matter what we cover, Syracuse just flat out got run over by Boston College today. Simple as that. Boston College had a simple and effective game plan that Syracuse was helpless to stop, and that was to run it straight down their throat. So the stat of the day is 313 rushing yards for Boston College. Syracuse could not counter on the ground itself. Its offense did what it could under duress all day, don't get me wrong, but 39 rushing yards in exchange for Syracuse. I mean, we could stop the show right now. That's what happened today in Chestnut Hill, about 7 miles west of Boston. Syracuse got run over today. So for all the talk of big people beat up little people and relentless and tough being a part of DART, Syracuse did not exhibit any of those things, not to mention some details we have to bring into defense. Maybe you want to stack the box a little bit. When Boston College is running as effectively as they are, they had a 34, 13, and 14-yard touchdown run. This is the second straight week, by the way, that Boston College, not that the quarterback really did anything. Certainly we saw more out of the quarterback for Virginia Tech last week because Boston College was running the ball so effectively. I could have been the quarterback for BC today, and they would have won. But the second straight week, you've got backups in at the quarterback position and other positions on the offense. And the Syracuse defense not only got run over, their tackling has been an issue all season long, and it was awful today. So really, that's the story of the game, but a few other things that we'll cover here as we go forward. As always, a pleasure to hear from our Syracuse Sports Insiders, and we will get their comments coming up here shortly. I think Chris Carlson might jump in as well from Boston. I want to hear what Fran Brown and company had to say after this one, so hopefully we'll get to catch up with Chris for a couple of minutes here. And, of course, we're thinking about Emily Liker. Today was our first day with Emily off the beat as she goes on to cover the Minnesota Vikings for the Minneapolis, now Minnesota Star Tribune. So shout out to Emily, of course, as she moves on here. And Chris was out there in Chestnut Hill covering all the action. I can talk, covering all the action for us out there. So we'll see if we can get some post-game reaction from him coming up. And our post-game reaction from our Syracuse Sports Insiders coming up. Join subtext.com/Syracuse Sports. The link there on your screen, an easy way to sign up. Or you can just text the word orange to 315-847-895. To get direct text messages from me, you can text me, as you certainly were during the course of this game, or anytime for the latest Syracuse sports opinions, knowledge, information, and insight. And we'll hear from our Syracuse Sports Insiders coming up shortly. And we hear exclusively from Syracuse Sports Insiders on this post-game show and the Syracuse Sports Podcast. We do not take comments from social media or anywhere else. Only our Syracuse Sports Insiders get highlighted here. So, look, Boston College just ran all over Syracuse today. A total of 313 yards. You had two different running backs go over 100 yards. 198 yards, 133 yards. Castellanos and Tom Brenneman called the game for the CW today, and we'll get to how bad that broadcast was here shortly. But Brenneman leaned in on the Castellanos joke. I'm not going to explain the joke. If you don't get it, either you kind of get it or you don't, as the kids would say. If you know, you know. The social media memes and everything that have come from a past Tom Brenneman experience, I'll put it that way. So the fact that BC had a quarterback named Castellanos was hilarious. He didn't do anything in this game. 2 for 7, 14 yards. He did have a touchdown, threw a pick, left the game in the second half with a lower body injury. So a backup quarterback comes in, but it didn't matter who the quarterback was. Syracuse could not stop the run. Big people beat up little people, relentless, tough, none of those things exhibited today. This was a one-dimensional football team playing with backups in certain spots, and Syracuse was helpless to stop it. Elijah Robinson, I don't want to say got completely outcoached today by Bill O'Brien, because all Bill O'Brien did was run the football, right? They had the great 4th-and-1 touchdown pass in the fourth quarter when Syracuse, and why wouldn't you, was expecting them to run the football on 4th-and-1. They lob it over the defense, falls in the end zone, and that was the deciding score, essentially. Syracuse put up another score, but that's the one that got Boston College over the top in this game. But where was stacking the box? Where was anything? Do anything. Do something. It just reminded me of that great scene from Spaceballs with her, at the end, they're all screaming at each other, do something, do something. Like, I didn't see the adjustments. Now, maybe it doesn't matter. As the old expression goes, it's not X's and O's, it's Jimmy's and Joe's. You're missing Tank Wilson. You're missing Kevin Jobity. I understand that defensive line is missing some guys, but you do have Marlo Axe back, and you do have some guys that can stop the run on that defense. This has been a bend but don't break defense all year. Today they broke. In other games, they've bent and bent and bent, and Fidel Diggs, and where's he been, by the way? He has been awful quiet the past couple of days. But Fidel Diggs will make a huge 4th-down play against Georgia Tech. Fidel Diggs will make a huge overtime tackle in overtime against UNLV that holds them to a field goal, right? Syracuse will come up with enough turnovers. Overtime last week, Virginia Tech, fumble, right? They take advantage of that, game over. So this defense has been an issue all year in tackling. It's bend but don't break, but they'll make the plays. And I wrote this in my preview, our picks, that in order for Syracuse to win today, they had to run the football, which they did not do. They only had 39 yards on the ground. The Quinn Allen did have 2 touchdowns on the day, so I will certainly give him credit for that. It was mostly McCord in the passing game that kept Syracuse alive, even under duress, and we have to get to that as well here shortly. But they didn't make the plays. They didn't rescue themselves with it. They did have a turnover. They did have some plays that kept them in the game, but you can't just rely on that. This bend but don't break philosophy really bit him square in the butt. And look, Boston College is a bad loss, as Stanford is. You can take one bad loss a year, but if you want to take that next step and be elite, and they were out of the ACC championship game contention as it was, maybe not mathematically. They're definitely out of it now. Miami lost today, but Miami and Syracuse playing in a couple of weeks. We'll see if Miami stays in this. They're still very much in the hunt for the ACC championship game. Don't get me wrong, but that's the difference. And you could say it's a first-year coaching staff and everything. Guys, look, I'm sorry. You can't have the patience anymore. We're in the transfer portal era. You can bring in a quarterback like McCord. You go get the talent that you did out of the portal. You don't have time to build these things as much as you used to. I understand there are some old-school philosophies applied to this. You can still recruit and build up depth and everything that a college football coach can do. But the process is accelerated in the portal era when your roster changes over as much as it does. So that Stanford loss stings, and the Boston College loss today really stings, because those are 2 games you should have won and you were better than the other team. Syracuse just has had this tendency to play down to teams like this. And it's easy for me to say Monday morning quarterbacking this thing, or in this case, Saturday afternoon quarterbacking this thing, but tell me I'm wrong on that. Boston College is not a better team than Syracuse. They played much better than Syracuse did. They ran their butts over, and Bill O'Brien and that team, Doug Marrone, remember, on that coaching staff too, in his latest dream job with the Boston College Eagles, longtime friend of Bill O'Brien. All credit to BC for doing what they did and running Syracuse over, right? So that stings, because that's not a team you should have lost to in the fashion that you did. Look at the score, and it was close. No, I mean, anybody that watched this game knows they got their butts run over. So that is a problem. A couple other problems that Syracuse has got to fix here. And look, they're going to a bowl game. This is still, by all accounts, probably going to be deemed a successful season for Fran Brown in year 1. If they match the win total from a year ago, we can haggle over that. But I still feel like the general feeling about this is good, and people see signs of progress and all that. They've got to win a couple more games to just ensure that, but it's a bad loss because of the way you lost, which goes against your philosophies. And BC was a one-dimensional team. People are saying Elijah Robinson got outcoached. Like, outcoached how? Stack the box and do some of these things, but Bill O'Brien didn't have some wonder kid game plan out there, to steal a phrase from my friend Bud Poliquin. They didn't have some whiz-bang game plan out there. They just ran it down your throat. Other issue for Syracuse is the slow starts on offense, right? The offensive line, and I'll get to that in a second, got pushed around all day by that Boston College defense. Syracuse lost in the trenches flat out today. Big people push little people around. Yeah, Boston College did that to Syracuse today. We got to get to some offensive line issues here, but this is the third straight game that Syracuse has not scored in the first quarter. Yet, as bad as the offense was, they tie it up. It's 14 apiece like that. That's because they're playing a mediocre football team. You play good teams, they're going to run away from you faster than that. They're going to execute more. How many passes before Castellanos went out? Open receivers, right? The tackling was bad enough. The physical front was bad enough. BC missed out on 2 or 3 other huge plays that were drops. Bellamy got an interception off of a play that went off right off the hands of a wide open Boston College receiver. Better offense, better team. By the way, Cal fits those descriptions. Syracuse now goes to Cal next week. You have to go all the way across the country to play a team that is the utter definition of the team no one wants to play. Cal is just one of those teams. Did you see him last night? Wild team that you just don't want to play. Now, maybe Syracuse can match wits with them offensively. It's a different matchup than it was today. And week by week, things can change. That's the beauty and sometimes the harm of college football, as Syracuse experienced today, right? But slow starts on offense in a game like this, you put a little more points up in the first half, maybe you outlast Boston College. One more score, right? I want to talk about the safety. I want to talk about the onside kick. I want to talk about a player that Fran Brown, frankly, and I'll say Jeff Nixon more specifically, has to get out of the lineup, and Syracuse has to make a change there, and a few other things. But before we continue, I want to bring them in, folks, from Boston College. And Chris, I'm getting a little interference on your end, my friend. I don't know if you got something open there. So I'm gonna knock Chris out for a second here, but when I brought Chris in, we had a little sound interference going on there, so we'll see if we can fix that. But we do have Chris Carlson standing by here to see if we can get his post-game report from Chestnut Hill. He's in the press box. He just got back from post-game festivities. I think he's got his – let me try it again here. No, unfortunately, Chris, we're getting a little interference on your end. I'm not sure what's happening there. We'll see if Chris can fix his technical issues there. It looks like he's trying to put some headphones in and trying to fix some things here, so we'll see if we can figure that out. Unfortunately, we had a little interference there, but I'm very curious to hear what Fran Brown had to say, what the players had to say after a tough loss like this. Did they kind of own up to it? Chris was saying a little bit from Fran that I saw earlier before we tried to connect, just to kind of give you the – let's see. On the onside kick, he said, what do you want me to say about that? Yeah, the onside kick, we'll get to that. Like, whatever. ACC refs interjecting themselves again. It's a call that could have gone either way, if you ask me. It didn't cost them the game in any way, shape, or form, but you just hate to see a great play, an executed onside kick thrown away by, what was it called? I don't think you have to make. I don't think that's a gotta throw the flag call on special teams. That's just me. But you can't put yourself in that position either, right? 4th and 1 call. Fran said that was a bad call by him. Run defense, they all admitted they weren't physical enough in that one. And we have to say this. For all the things that didn't go right for Syracuse in this game, Aronde Gadsden's catch is one of the catches of the year in college football. A one-handed masterpiece. Back shoulder throw, great catch, and a play that Syracuse really needed at the time. Chris, I'm going to try you. No, unfortunately. So, Chris, I think we're just going to have to not have you come in, unfortunately. We're having some interference on your end, something technical going on there. Sorry about that, folks, but we're not going to be able to get Chris Carlson in from the press box in Chestnut Hill. A little interference there. Yep, it happens. Live show. Sometimes things don't connect. So you'll certainly read all about what Chris has to report from the press box and all the post-game festivities to come. Make sure you check that out on syracuse.com, of course. All right, so back to what we were saying before we tried to hook up with Chris there. You can't go 3 games in a row without scoring a point in the first quarter, especially you had 5 possessions before you got on the board. Tied the game, so you could say, all right, well, that cancels out because the offense got into it. No. 1 or 2 more scores in that spot maybe outlast Boston College as opposed to losing. It all adds up It's great that Syracuse is a second half team, and it's not how you start and it's how you finish and all those cliches in sports. The points add up on the scoreboard in the first quarter as much as they do in the fourth. That's a problem. You know what else is a problem right now? And I don't want to pick on the guy, but if you're asking me to just give you some fair, objective analysis here, Darius Weatherspoon has to get off the field. They have to make a change at left tackle. They did it today a little bit, but he came back in and was partially responsible for the safety, which we'll talk about here shortly. I get Fran's philosophy. Weatherspoon is a big kid. What is he, 6'7", 330? Let me look it up while we're talking about it here just to get the exact measurements on Weatherspoon. And I think that's encouraging that you bring in a Weatherspoon and you bring in a Savion Washington from Colorado. Big guys on the offensive line. Size typically matters. In this case, it does not. Weatherspoon has slow feet. He gets beat all the time. He got beat consistently in this game. He got bullied by Boston College in this game. And look, you take a chance when you bring in a player. Weatherspoon, they call him Big Spoon. He's a great kid. I've talked to him a few times, but if we're talking about performance on the field, he's just not coming through. And you have to think about Big Spoon. Yeah, I was right. 6'7", 330, right? Coming from Howard, a few levels below Division I, ACC, big-time football, right? A player you want to take a chance on because he is 6'7", 330, and that looks good on the left side of the offensive line. He's getting beat too much. I like that Fran is rotating guys on the offensive line. I appreciate Fran's honesty when he said earlier this week, we've got to play 8 or 9 guys because if not, they're going to go in the portal. Totally agree with that. Totally agree with that, right? Offense, defense, wherever you can. You got to keep as many people happy as you can, especially talented players, or else they're going to go somewhere where they're going to play. Totally agree with that and appreciate that. But if they can't play, they can't play. Spoon now has to be depth. He has to be someone that can come in as that 7th or 8th guy that can spell somebody at times. He is not a starting left tackle in the ACC. He gets beat too much. I don't want to say who because I didn't say that I would mention their name, so I won't. But I was texting with a former Syracuse player during the game who actually sent me video and broke it down on the video about how he's getting beat at the left tackle position. He's really struggling. So I think you've got to make a change there. You got to put Woolabaugh in at left tackle and take your chances there because Weatherspoon is consistently getting beat. So Syracuse had this weird play. There was 2 plays where we can haggle with the refs. In no way did it cost Syracuse the game, but I think it needs to be mentioned because the Orange had 10 penalties today, and most of them were legit. The safety, it's 21-21. Kyle McCord gets wrapped up by a defender. His forward progress is clearly stopped. Second defender comes in, knocks him down, ball comes out. Now, the ball did come out before a knee touched or anything touched, so it's not that. Boston College knocks the ball through the end zone. That's a safety. They could have easily had a touchdown there. Another play that, Boston College was begging Syracuse to take this game in a lot of ways. Missed out on that play, right? That should have been stopped. His forward progress was stopped. He was wrapped up. Blow the whistle. Where are these refs protecting the quarterbacks and stopping plays? They let that play go on too long. Boston College should not have got those 2 points. Again, factor it in. They probably still win considering how they just bullied Syracuse all day. Maybe it's 35-31 instead of 37-31. But that was a factor. And then there was the illegal block on the onside kick. Look, I don't think you have to call that. Technically, did he not go 10 yards and the guy jumped up for the ball and Syracuse tried to block him? It's like, if you're the ref, you're like, I got to throw the flag there. I think you can let that go. It's just so frustrating when you see an executed onside kick in the NFL, college football, whatever the case may be these days. And of course, the flag flies in, right? Get out of the way. Let these guys settle the game. Syracuse executes an onside kick that's not an egregious have to call a penalty. In my opinion, maybe you disagree. And how great would it have been? Maybe I'm just letting storylines take over my head here. How great would it have been if a special teams play wins the game for Syracuse? By the way, BC's special teams missed a field goal early. They shanked a punt early. We found a special teams unit that's worse than Syracuse. Syracuse's special teams were actually fine today, right? They had a penalty there, another penalty on special teams. But considering what we've been dealing with all year, you'll take it. Windy there in Boston today. You didn't want it to come down to a winning kick in those wins, and it didn't. And for the most part, special teams was fine, Jack. Stonehouse was fine today. There wasn't any major screw-ups on special teams today. So maybe I'm just letting the storyline take over in my head. Let the kids decide the game, right? Give them the onside kick. Considering some things you let go in that game, come on. So I was a little bummed about that. So really, that's the story today. Syracuse got run over. Slow starts are hurting them on offense, and a few other things that we noted here in this game. But I want to hear what you guys have to say about this one. Let's go to our Syracuse Sports Insiders and what they're thinking about this one, including Drew K, who says it's officially basketball season. Maybe, Drew. Speaking of defensive issues, that team's having some defensive issues of its own, even through just one game here. We'll see if Syracuse's defense improves Tuesday night when they take on Colgate. But funny how those two things link up. Syracuse's football defense can't tackle, got run over today, and was a real liability in this one. And the Syracuse basketball defense really has to pick up the pace. Colgate, as we know, has beaten Syracuse twice in recent years, can hit threes, and not a team you want to lag on defense again. So we'll see what happens there on Tuesday. Not quite, Drew, right? We're not giving up on football, but you lose a game like this, and it just takes so much steam out of the equation, right? They're still interesting. We'll see if they can get to the 8-win plateau and what kind of bowl game they're going to. But you lose to a team like this, you clearly should have beaten, and it does take a little steam out of it. James W. We mentioned it. Weatherspoon's been a turnstile at left tackle against better edge rushers all year. BC's got a great edge rusher, by the way. NFL draft level edge rusher. Doesn't matter. Weatherspoon's been an issue all year. He let up 3 big sacks today. David Wollabaugh should be starting at left tackle for the remainder of the year, and I do agree with that. Michael S. says Coach Brown did a great job of getting all the skill players. Now he's got to get us some beef. That's the difference between elite teams and teams that just dream of being elite. And look, there's only so many offensive linemen in the portal. Elite offensive linemen in recruiting. Same thing with defensive guys. I brought it up earlier. To be fair, Tank Wilson, gone. Kevin Jobity, gone. Had some injury issues on this defensive line. But Boston College should not be a team that outrushes you 313 to 39. 313 to 39. We mentioned the pass protection issues for Kyle McCord as well. McCord had 392 yards passing in this game. Both Arondé Gatson, who we mentioned, that touchdown catch he had, that's one of the catches of the year in college football. So shout out to him for that. Jackson Meeks, 7 catches, 105 yards. Meeks was the benefit of a couple of pass interference calls, which, hey, good for him. You got him called. One, I think, was, let's say Syracuse got away with one. The other was totally legit, right? And Meeks helped the cause there. Sometimes a little acting gets you a call. Hey, you'll take it. Drove Syracuse down the field. So McCord has thrown for 300 yards in every game except one for Syracuse. Last week, he did not throw for 300 yards. He did everything he could. He was constantly under duress. He was sacked 4 times, hurried a bunch more, completing throws on the run, back shoulder throws. He did eventually make that adjustment. You can haggle and say Syracuse did not adjust quickly on offense with the 5 possessions without points. We can have that conversation. I don't have a lot of beef with the offense today. I don't like the fact that they only had 39 rushing yards today, but that shows you how they lost in the trenches. They couldn't get the push to run the football, and certainly the defense got pushed around. LaQuinn Allen scrapped out 50 yards, 2 touchdowns. He did what he had to do in the red zone, despite the offensive line issues. Offense was not the problem today, short of the slow starts. That has to be noted, and you can't keep doing that. You can't go 3 straight games without scoring in the first quarter. But the offense did enough to kind of get away with a win today. It was the defense that completely let them down today. All right, back to what you guys had to say about this one. And what Michael S. said applies, because there's only so much beef you can get out there, right? We talked about Weatherspoon. He's an example of a player who you bring in, 6'7", 330, hard to resist, but can struggle at this level. That's the risk you take by trying to upgrade somebody from Howard to Syracuse. People will say that about basketball too. Can a Jaquan Carlos make the leap from Hofstra to Syracuse? Can Jair Davis had a terrific debut, but can he make the leap long term from Delaware to Syracuse, right? That's the risk you take in the portal, is can these guys and make that adjustment quickly, right? From Frankie F., who says, I like Fran, but this loss falls squarely on the shoulders of the coaching staff. You absolutely cannot get torched on the ground like that and have only 6 guys in the box on every play. Let me throw this out there rhetorically. Has there been a time this year, and look, this is a first-year coaching staff. You got to give them some time, but also, as we brought up, right? Patience is thin in the portal era because you bring in talent and you've got to maximize that talent as much as you can in year one, right? Give me 1 second here, guys. I just got to close the door to my right. Stand by. You guys didn't see that, but my cat was trying to come in the room. I should have brought him in, brought him on the show. He loves sports. We could bring him in on the show. I looked to my right. I'm like, oh my God, there's a cat over there. Where'd he come from? Didn't close the door all the way. Anyway, so what were we saying before Contour the cat tried to interrupt our post-game show here? Oh, so when you have these new guys and you're trying to acclimate them quickly, right? Get them out of the portal, get them out there quickly. As Mike C goes on to say this, they beat us with the strategy Fran wants to employ. Run the ball, stop the run, and we know we're a passing team, but the stop the run part hasn't been there. I'm just trying to think this year, even trying to be fair about the portal and the new guys and a new coaching staff trying to find its way. When has this coaching staff, have you walked away from a game and you said, man, did they out-coach that team? Once. To me, it's once. Georgia Tech. And part of out-coaching Georgia Tech was how Fran played it during the week, right? He played up the whole thing about Georgia Tech, said they were more physical than us, and we're a Northeast football team. That was a masterstroke by Fran Brown during the week. I still think he's learning on the job. I certainly still think Elijah Robinson is learning on the job as a first-time defensive coordinator. I have a little more faith in Jeff Nixon. Again, Nixon's got to fix this issue of this team starting slow. I'm not excusing that. But the McCord play where he faked the end around, ran for 30 yards, that was a great call. I like the pro-style offense that Nixon runs for the most part. I don't have a lot of issues with Nixon. He's been around the block a few times. He has that experience. And when you give him a quarterback like Kyle McCord, more times, often than not, that offense is going to be fine, right? But I'm trying to think of when are the times that Syracuse just flat out coach the opposition? Bill O'Brien's a great football coach, right? But he's still a first-year coach at BC, as Fran is a first-year coach. Now, Bill O'Brien's certainly been around the block a little longer than Fran, and Fran will learn from these matchups against these great coaches that he's running into. But in these games you got to have in the portal era with the teams that you beat, the temporary teams that you build, you've got to take advantage of that. You needed Elijah Robinson to not be a first-year defensive coordinator trying to figure things out today. Know what to do, stack the box, make the adjustment. Maybe it wasn't X's and O's, it was Jimmy's and Joe's, as I said earlier, and I get that. But you hate to walk away from a game like that saying these guys were green and just they didn't know what they were doing. And there was a lot of times in this game where it felt like that, right? These guys, look, have forgotten more about coaching than I'll ever know, but you got to know in those spots. And at the very least, if you get that sense walking away from the game, they did this, they adjusted, they did that, and they still lost, fine. But you don't want to have the feeling you didn't try everything you could to try. But again, all Boston College did was run it up your throat. Maybe that's just the humble pie you got to eat. Right? You just got ran over by a better football team. You could have put in the 4-3, the 3-3-5, the 4-2-5, invented defense, the 2-3 zone. You just got run over, right? Maybe it was just that simple, and I'm making it more complex than it is. From David C., who says, this loss is on the defense, but the offense needs to share some blame as well. 8 empty drives out of 13 overall. A very inefficient day. From Dave M, who says, I can't believe next week's game is on the CW again. Tom Brenneman isn't very good and also not good with math, insisting that BC should have gone for 2. All right, I want to say this about the broadcast, okay? Good on Brenneman for leaning into the Castellanos thing. I'll give him credit for that, right? But that whole thing throughout the broadcast, as just brought up there by Dave, I'll put it back on the screen here for a sec, about BC going for 2, Tom, shut up. Let your color analyst handle that. That got so annoying, and Brenneman knew he was wrong. Like, he was insisting on it. Then he tried to backtrack on it, and he came back to it 2 or 3. Dude, let it go. Let your analyst handle that. Call the game. No one wants to hear what Tom Brenneman thinks about what they should do in that situation. Or name me a play caller. Joe Buck, Anish Shroff. Shout out to Anish, my friend. I don't want the play-by-play guy's opinion that much. That's why you have a color guy that played football that can do that for us. I don't mind when play-by-play guys interject that and say, oh, they should go for 2 here, because they're thinking what the viewer's thinking, right? But, man, he would not let it go. And to that point, I was like, you know what? This broadcast isn't actually that bad, but this is going to be the 3rd straight week when they go to Cal that Syracuse is on the CW. And now I'm going to dread when they are on that network, because you're going down the list, right? This is not A-level broadcasting that you're getting. The ACC, I get it. It gets it on TV. It's better to be on TV than not. We weren't watching some digital stream on ESPN plus 3 today. At least I just turned on my TV and there was the game, so that's great. But good God, he would not let that go. And Dave, you make a good point there. From Jamal says, I'm frustrated because next year's schedule is going to be rough. BC's a team that we are better than, and I feel like Syracuse is going to be 7-5 this year. In reality, the Stanford and BC games were winnable, and we were the better team. I see no lies in that comment there, Jamal. From Robbie T, first and foremost, we have to do a better job stopping the run. However, we can't deny the impact of the missed call that resulted in a safety, along with the questionable call on the onside kick, pardon me. Yeah, we went over that a little earlier, Robbie. It has to be discussed. The safety, you take 2 points off the board. The onside kick, I would have liked to have seen Syracuse try and drive with that onside kick and score rather than a ref stepping in there on a call he doesn't have to make, in my opinion. But that's not why they lost. They didn't swing the game. They got their butts run over, and that's why they lost this game today, right? I imagine that's what our friend from Florida is about to say here as we go to the secret voicemail line to see what our guy Rockin' Ron has to say.
Hey, Brent. Rockin' Ron in Florida. Hey, shout out to Emily. I miss her already. Well, I don't know how to take this game so far, but I let this set in a little bit. And I'm pinning this game on Elijah Robinson and the poor tackling. There's no way we could stop that running game of theirs. They ran for 313 yards. And we knew this by halftime. I just can't get it through my head why he wouldn't take out a linebacker, put another defensive lineman down, and stack the D-line and have the passing game beat us if they were going to. But the way it was going with the running, we couldn't stop them till that one time in the 4th quarter. But to me, the D-line with their tackling and their couldn't stop the run cost us that game. Now the offense, when you score 31 points, you should be able to win a game, I think. However, the first 5 series, we didn't score anything, but and of course the offensive line was not up to par either, for sure. But they did finally, once McCord started getting the ball out quicker and finding his receivers, we started scoring and doing a good job. But anyways, again, 31 points, you should win a game.
Can't disagree, Rock and Ron. Rock and Ron, our guy from the secret voicemail line. You score 31 points, you should win. The offense gutted out, not scoring on the first 5 possessions. It has to be noted that they didn't score on the first 5 possessions and that they haven't scored in the first quarter in 3 straight games, but they found a way around their issues, right? Despite the lack of the running game, LaQuinn Allen scored 2 touchdowns. McCord found a way around the lack of protection, right? They had 2 receivers over 100 yards. They did enough. They did enough. All told, Syracuse had more yards. In their I'm pretty sure that in their 3 losses, they've had more yards than the other team. Like, of course, Pitt had the rather unique circumstance of 5 interceptions, 3 pick sixes on Kyle McCord, but Syracuse held the ball in that game for 44 minutes. I think had more yards than Pittsburgh, right? I think Syracuse had more yards in the Stanford game as well. You know what? Well, we're yapping about that. Let me look up those things while we're on the subject. But because the reason I'm making that point is and look, yards aren't always everything, but it is notable that if this is true, in all 3 games, if you had more yards than your opponent. So let's see. Stanford game. Dum 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 dum. Give me a second here, guys. Yep, Syracuse outgained Stanford 339 to 178. All right. Let's go to loss number 2. Pitt, which, again, such a weird circumstance as we brought up here, but, just for giggles here. Total yards, 327, 217. Syracuse held the ball, and Syracuse is a top 10 team in the country in time of possession. Syracuse held the ball for 41 minutes and 12 seconds in that game. They lose 41-13. Today they had more yards than Boston College, and they lose. 431 to 378, but the big stat, of course, 313 to 39 rushing yards. Syracuse had 392 passing yards to BC 65. So a huge disparity there, but we saw the one that mattered the most in this game. So Syracuse falls to 6-3. Syracuse will be back at it next week. And as we brought up earlier, guys, Cal, not an easy trip. You got to go across the country to play Cal. Every time first of all, Cal has been one of the more entertaining teams in college football. They've lost a lot of close games this year, but you are never, ever bored when the Cal Golden Bears, now 5-4 of the Atlantic Coast Conference, which is still weird to say, are on the field. They're coming off consecutive wins, 44-7 over Oregon State, in a wild game against Wake Forest, a 46-36 win. And I'm just looking in here at some numbers on that one. Maybe this is the kind of game Syracuse wants to get into. It's more of a shootout. It's more apt to what their offense is going to be. We'll see what the weather is in Cal next week. Again, weather was fine today, short of some wind. But the November curse that people have brought up, right? Syracuse wins a game in November last week, which is big because you've got to break that November hex that's there. And this team has put an emphasis on that, winning these games in November. We got to win games in November on the road. You did it at home. That's great. You went on the road today, lost the game you clearly should have had, not only by matchups on paper, but things we saw in this game that you could have overcome despite BC's great running game, right? They got to not only go on the road. This Boston, that's a 5-hour drive, right? You take a nap in the car, you're there. Now you got to go all the way across the country and play a game noon Eastern time next week, 3 o'clock Pacific time. Not making it easy on yourself, right, to recover from this one. But that's how the schedule breaks out. That's the position Syracuse put themselves in with a 37-31 loss to Boston College today. Thank you to our Syracuse Sports Insiders for being a part of the show. Thanks to you for watching and listening. Don't forget to subscribe, follow on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, wherever you get your podcasts, so you can listen to this podcast, including our live post-game shows, on demand whenever you want. New episodes of Syracuse Sports coming your way as well. So make sure you're subscribed to make sure the show comes to you so you can listen on demand whenever you want. Thanks to Krause Health, exclusive healthcare partner for Syracuse Athletics. So programming note, we mentioned next Saturday's football broadcast, but Tuesday night, we got Syracuse Colgate back to the basketball on Tuesday night. See if the Orange can start 2-0 and overcome some of those defensive issues that showed themselves against Lemoyne. We'll have a live post-game show after that one, as we'll have live post-game shows after most Syracuse basketball games this year. We will not have one after Syracuse and Youngstown State because we're going to focus on football next Saturday. So we won't have a basketball post-game show. Those two things conflict. If you missed it, they did move the time up. So Syracuse Youngstown State basketball will now tip at 1 o'clock. The football game kicks off at 3. So, yeah, you're probably going to miss a little bit of the game if you're driving from the Dome back home to watch that one. But that was originally supposed to be a 2 o'clock tip time, so they moved that one. Still 7 o'clock tip for Syracuse and Colgate, and we'll have a post-game show after that. So, in the meantime, enjoy the rest of your weekend. Thanks for hanging with us tonight on Syracuse Football Postgame, presented by Krause Health. The Orange lose to Boston College, 37-31. My name is Brent Axe, and we will talk to you next time, guys.